Welcome to the JCPS series on elementary school multi-tiered systems of support for behavior. This module focuses on how MTSS teams gather data to use in developing behavior plans for students. In any school, one of the key tasks of the MTSS team is to oversee universal screening for behavior and the identification of students at risk for failure. In some schools, the main MTSS team continues with additional assessment of these identified students. But in most schools, for purposes of better understanding the problem and developing an intervention plan, there is a separate team charged with further assessment. These may be called MTSS behavior teams or student intervention teams. Sometimes, this additional assessment may conclude that a student is at minimal risk and the plan is to do nothing more than to monitor. But in other cases, the team will undertake a number of assessment activities based on a student's presenting problems. While the main MTSS team was made up of broad representation across the school, student intervention teams are likely not as representative. Instead, these teams often include those with a background in behavior and may include special educators, counselors, and school psychologists. In a given case, persons familiar with the student may be invited to help provide further information and context. For example, if a student is seen as having problems in a particular classroom, that teacher may be invited. Similarly, if there is some indication of mental health or family issues, the school mental health practitioner may be invited. Often, student intervention teams have a set meeting schedule, at least weekly, depending on need. At each meeting, there are specific student cases that have been referred for assessment. The team looks at the presenting data and determines what additional data may be necessary. This is an elementary student intervention team. Listen to how they organize their meeting.
Hey everyone, thanks for being on time today. We have a couple of new students on our agenda and then a follow-up one from the last time.
Do we have information on the two new students?
We don't know much about Jasper yet. He was identified as at risk on our screener that we just did, but we need a little bit more info on him.
Okay, so what do we know about Sandra?
We know that she was referred by her teacher for some things that she was having trouble with in class with like peer relations and stuff like that.
I know Jasper. He comes by the counseling office all the time. He's just looking for somebody to talk to.
And I know Sandra, I helped break up one of her fights on the playground.
Hannah, who was the follow-up case?
It's Eric.
Eric, that's right. We were talking about him last week. He had the noises, the shouting out. I believe it was with Miss Perry. Is she going to be here today?
Yeah, I was able to talk to a couple of his teachers, the librarian and the PE teacher, but we need a little bit more info. So let's start with Jasper and Sandra, and then Miss Perry will arrive, and we'll get to talk about Eric.
Note that the team has an agenda with specific students to be considered. For each student, the conversations will involve looking at whatever data is available, determining what other data is necessary in order to plan for intervention, and then building and overseeing the intervention plan. While screeners are helpful in identifying students who may be at risk for failure, the information is typically not sufficient for any real understanding of the student's problems or needs. But teams can easily access other available student information in the form of discipline referrals and academic scores. Student files sometimes contain additional assessment information, which may be helpful in painting the full picture of a student and his or her challenges. For example, student files house information regarding any other assessment that may have been conducted and will hold any information related to special education assessment and diagnosis. Students can be referred to the intervention team through the MTSS team's screening process or directly from a concerned adult. When doing a file review, teams want to determine whether there is any assessment data or reports that might shed some light on the reason for referral. The idea is to have enough information to develop a simple explanation, one that leads to a simple but effective intervention. Adults that have observed the behavior of students in natural settings provide the richest source of information for any student. Over a period of several months, a classroom teacher has observed the students in his or her classroom for several hours a day. These school-based observations are tremendous sources of information and must be solicited. After a simple conversation involving others who know the student, if the team has confidence in their explanation, they may move forward with a simple intervention strategy, monitoring closely for effect. But when there is no consensus as to why problems are occurring, or if simple interventions have been ineffective, The team's assessment goes much deeper. This is the point when observations of the student and more structured interviews with other adults begin. Taking an ecological view of the problem, the team's focus is on understanding how student behavior and the environment are related. This perspective can involve formal processes with strict protocol, but is more simply used by considering past observations of student behavior. We know that behavior tends to happen in predictable ways, and for a purpose. We sometimes refer to this purpose as functional, as in, what function does this behavior serve for that student? If we can predict the conditions under which a problem behavior occurs and what the student is getting as a result, we have the information necessary to prevent it. This behavior pathway represents a logic for thinking about behavior. Problem behaviors are generally more likely under some set of conditions and continue because the consequence is functional. It gives the student something they like or helps to escape/avoid something not liked. There are two broad ways that behavior can function for students. The first is that it can help them to get something that they want, and the second is to help them to escape or avoid something they do not like. In JCPS, we think of these functions in 4 categories that can be memorized by using the acronym EATS to designate escape and avoidance, attention seeking, tangible items, and sensory. Escape and avoid refers to behaviors that have the function of helping students to get away from something in the environment. This might include escaping work that is hard or boring, avoiding a consequence or confrontation, getting away from unwanted attention, or avoiding an event that is unpleasant, such as an assembly or class discussion. Attention-seeking behaviors are those that help the student to get attention. Sometimes the attention is simply eye contact, and other times it may be in the form of assistance. Further, a student may behave to get positive attention or negative attention. For many students, any attention is desirable, regardless of whether it is happy or unhappy on the part of those providing attention. Tangible access refers to behaviors that students use to access objects or events in the environment. Tangibles include items such as toys, books, phones, or other such things that can be possessed. But it also includes access to events or situations, such as free time, sharing time, or other circumstances that students find pleasant. Finally, students may behave to either access or escape sensory input. For example, a student may engage in misbehavior for the opportunity to access pleasant sensory input, things like rocking, sleeping, and a range of self-stimulatory behaviors. By that same token, students may behave in order to escape from aversive sensory inputs, such as noises, movements, light, and other things that may be present in a given environment. These same 4 functions can be applied to consideration of intervention at every level. At Tier 1, we'd want to think about why students crowd in the cafeteria line before coming up with a new teachable expectation. At Tier 2, for example, students who do not like adult attention are unlikely to be successful in a check-in, check-out intervention or with any more individualized intervention. In fact, teams will always need to give consideration to function in the development of an intervention. The logic of thinking through the function of student behavior is comprised of 3 basic questions. First, what is the behavior? Can we get a concrete definition? Second, when and under what conditions is the behavior most likely? And third, what's in it for the student? What is the student getting that makes the behavior worth the effort? Let's start with descriptions of the behavior. Universal screeners and other broad assessments provide very vague behavior labels. We need a clear description we can use to look for behavior. Words like lazy and annoying are not behaviors. They are descriptions of a range of behaviors. Here are a few questions that help people answer questions with more descriptive terms. Questions as to what does it look and sound like are pretty basic, but it's also interesting to know something about frequency, latency, duration, speed, and intermittency. Leaving dents in a wall tells us that the student is throwing things with great intensity. While not essential, the environment and behavior worksheet may provide a nice structure for helping teams to think through all the components of the behavior pathway, linking back to the 4 possible functions. A great strategy for helping people to provide good descriptions is to ask for details that could be used in acting the behavior out for them. Ask them to write a script that is so detailed, when you act it out, it will look and sound just like what they've seen. Let's watch the team question the teacher about the definition of a student's behavior.
Hey, Miss Perry, thanks for being here. I think you know everybody here, right?
Hey, Ms. Perry, we were just talking about Eric and some of the things we've seen and heard, but I know you're his teacher, and we'd love to hear what you've seen.
Well, thank you for taking the time to help me with this. He really has me at wit's end. He just makes these distracting noises all the time, and particularly during the quiet times.
So you're only hearing these noises during the quiet work time?
No, but it's definitely more common then.
Could you describe a little bit more of what the noises sound like or look like?
Sure, he yells, claps, snaps his fingers, touches his toes, taps his fingers.
You know, at one point we were talking about him screaming and making animal noises. Is he still doing any of that?
Not really. He's just very fidgety and makes these noises that even disturb the other children.
How often are you seeing this happen?
I would say about 4 to 5 times a day, but again, it's not usually during the quiet work times that it's most prevalent.
Do you think that if it happens once, it's more likely to happen again?
Probably, but I'm not sure.
So do you think if we describe this behavior as clapping, tapping, snapping fingers, banging on things, would that be like what you're seeing in the classroom, an accurate picture?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Returning to our behavior pathway, the yellow boxes show the pieces we need to determine. Note that we can now add disruptive noises to the behavior box. Once the behavior has been described, we move to questions about prediction. It's fine to simply ask about predictors, but more specific questions are helpful in getting people to really think about all the possibilities. The main environmental predictors are teachers, peers, and workload. With peers and teachers, we want to consider whether attention is present or absent prior to behavior. With workload, we want to consider the types of requests that are likely to precede misbehavior. One logical way is to ask, if I was coming tomorrow and said there was $10,000 in it for you if I saw the problem you're talking about, what would you have going on? This prompt makes people think about predictor conditions and triggers. Let's watch as the team continues with these questions.
All right, so let's talk about what might be more predictable about when the behavior occurs. I know you said that it happens during quiet, independent work time. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, I don't know. It seems like there are times when he gets lonely and he starts making noises.
Are there times when this isn't a problem? Like times when he doesn't make any noises at all?
Well, I guess if we're having a full class discussion or I'm talking directly to him or he's talking to somebody.
So he makes noises during independent work, not during full class discussion?
Yes, I would say so.
So just to clarify, it's not during the reading or math work time, it's more that independent quiet work time?
Yes, it's not during the classwork time. It is more on the independent side, yes.
When all this is happening, what are you doing?
Typically, I'm grading papers, I'm talking to another student, distracted, not looking at him.
So during this time, your eyes are less likely to be on him?
Yes.
So it kind of sounds like that he displays this behavior whenever it's like quiet, independent time, and also especially when you are not looking at him. Does that sound right?
Returning to our behavior pathway, we can now add quiet, independent time as the typical setting and no direct teacher attention as the trigger. We now see how the environment might predict a particular misbehavior. Next, we need to ask how the environment serves a purpose for that behavior. Is it giving the student something desired or relieving the student of something aversive? These questions may be helpful in getting respondents to consider functional outcomes that may not have been obvious. Sometimes it's helpful to simply ask, why would the student want to do that? Or what's in it for him or her? Often, these questions lead to multiple answers, but what we push for is what is most likely. If you were betting what would happen, what outcome would you bet on? Let's now watch the team question the teacher about possible functional outcomes.
I guess attention. Maybe he's just lonely.
What do the other students do?
They ignore him. They've got their own work and their own thoughts.
So then what do you do?
I'll typically go to him and ask him what he needs or tell him to stop.
When you ask him what he needs, what does he tell you?
Oh, it's the typical, when's recess, what's for lunch, need a pencil. that type of thing.
Does he ask those questions of you without making noises?
Once he has my attention, he doesn't make the noises.
Is he getting out of work during these conversations?
No, not typically because the interactions are so brief.
Do you think maybe he's just craving your attention?
Possibly. Sometimes I think he really just wants his questions answered.
Why do you think he doesn't raise his hand?
Honestly, if he did, I probably wouldn't see it.
Well, I think this has been some really good information, and it kind of sounds like his behavior might be attention seeking, but not just attention seeking for you, but more like to get something from you, like asking those questions. Does that seem logical to y'all?
Yes.
Returning to our behavior pathway, the team determined that the function of behavior is access to the teacher to meet their needs. So the reason the student makes noises under these conditions is because it works. It gets them what they want. Under these conditions, noise making is functional for the student. Often, people consider only the functional consequence part of the pathway and try to build an intervention based solely on consequences. But interventions that occur before problem behaviors, called antecedent interventions, are critical to success. Antecedent interventions include things like instruction, as in teaching new behavior, reminders, and changes in the environment. The behavior pathway tells us much about predictors for both success and failure. We'll want to maximize environments that predict success and then minimize triggers, while also teaching students better ways to respond. Academic interventions can also have a major impact on student behavior. When a behavior pathway indicates that misbehavior functions to avoid math work, providing individualized math instruction or interspersing easy math problems in the work can be very functional antecedent interventions. As we wrap up this module on using data to inform behavior intervention, remember that effective intervention relies on the use of data to maximize the probability of success.